Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Psychedelic Philosopher 7, or as people know me, Josh. Um, Welcome. I thought there's some things I'd like to share, some things I'd like to discuss, which I've been discussing with many people who may be watching already, and which I'd like to record and see what happens, where it goes. You may have seen my last video on my channel, which was a talk I gave about my dissertation for my master's on a variety of topics. So go check that out if you're interested. The it's a lot about kind of more scientific side of my interests and what I've been up to over the past few years. But I'm really interested at the moment in sharing a little bit more of the perhaps philosophical side of my ideas and not my ideas. I mean, the ideas which have come to me and I found myself with, perhaps, would be a better way of putting it. But yeah, I mean, I just wanted to kind of share a little bit more about myself and my own journey um, in terms of my beliefs, in terms of my practices, and my understanding of the big topics, religion, spirituality, science, and how these things interact, as well as history, psychology, politics. I mean, all of these topics I'm fascinated by and hope to delve into more on this format on this channel. So, without further ado, I think perhaps we should just dive right in. But thank you anyway for joining if you've got this far. And well, I will have hopefully put the title up by now. So I wanted to talk today about my experience mostly with how I can kind of conceptualize and understand and interact with what I perceive to be God uh, in my own life. Ultimately, with the hope I think of trying to help other people to connect with the same power that I believe that I have been and am connecting with. That's what we're all connected to, as I hope to get into. Um, so maybe a little bit about me. I mean, as you know, hopefully we'll kind of weave into this as a thread through this little video essay that I'm engaging in right now. To kind of I think I want to give a bit of context to where I'm coming at this from, where my ideas are coming from, so people can you know understand a little bit better what I mean, because so often uh, words and language are the things which seem to fail us and can cause such division and friction. And who doesn't love a good story? So, yeah, so a little bit about me. I mean, growing up, I'm from the UK, and so I was raised in quite a more conservative kind of household, quite traditional Christianity, form of kind of Protestant Christianity, but still quite traditional. And yeah, I mean, I think it's important to say this because a lot of what I want to talk about today, is I'm sure you will have already gleaned from the title, is about how I interact with God as a mother, which is a concept which might well be familiar to you too, and I hope it is, and it brings you the joy that it has brought me. And I'd love to hear any of your experiences of this, and of course all of your thoughts, and whether in person in the comments or however other medium. Um, but I mean, for me personally, this is a quite a recent development in my own spiritual journey, um, and it's been a crazy and wild ride. Um, it's not all love and light. Well, maybe it is underneath it all, but I mean, there's times where even the notion of conceptualizing of God in a non-traditional way is very frowned upon in traditional religion. I mean, religions by their nature seem to necessitate the imposition of some kind of structure, order, some kind of lines and boundaries and dogmatic statements that make you, some kind of member of this group, this organization that gives you a sense of identity, purpose, and common phrases and words that are used help reinforce that. And I mean, for me personally, now when I think about that, and I think about the way that most a lot of maybe not most religious institutions, at least institutions like the Vatican, for example, or the Church of England too, the way in which it's very hierarchical, and also the kind of patriarchal nature of these institutions, uh, and the way in which they order themselves and have one kind of single head figure. Um, I don't know. There's some sense of something that I think that grants people. And there's almost a simplicity to it, and this kind of sense of security, and you don't have to think too much, because some guy who's meant to be communicating with God, he'll tell you what's cool and what's not, and you don't have to worry about talking and listening. More importantly, to God yourself, because you can just kind of outsource it to someone else. I mean, interestingly enough, in the Bible, I think I'm correct in saying that Jesus says to his disciples, I believe, or to whoever's asking him the question. He says, you shouldn't call people on earth father in the way that people do to priests, for example. Call them father, and in that way, you enter into this almost kind of child-parent relationship with the institution, and this institution which has this very kind of patriarchal, quite masculine form. Is quite rigid, well defined. There's sometimes room for spontaneity, and I mean, in a lot of modern Christian movements, especially like more Protestant movements, there have been more kind of Holy Spirit led worship or ministry time. So there is kind of space within these institutions for a lot of very meaningful emotional experiences for people, and that too obviously can it's why be another drive for people to want to go to church, to have those kind of moments of awe in a beautiful building with a lot of other people, all joining in unison, or however you say it, with the voices, or just feeling the presence of everyone in the room, and what I would believe and characterize as a spiritual presence, and I think this isn't limited to churches. I think that well, really, it can be found everywhere. I mean, personally, the biggest kind of development in my own journey has been away from kind of monotheism, and this idea that there's just one God, and it's my God. It's this name and these words, and that's God. And any other words or practices or ideas, symbols, they've got to be false. I've come around to a much more kind of animistic, pantheistic, panpsychist view. I mean, if you might not know, I've heard of any of those words before, but basically it just means this idea that kind of God is everywhere, everything, and that we are all in some way kind of an incarnation of God, like simulating the experience of being all the different individuals that God can be, to just experience the range of creativity available to it. And yeah, I mean, I think this is, these kind of thoughts, this kind of way of thinking, it's often associated with paganism, at least in Christianity, in Islam too, in generally just the Abrahamic faiths, the way that they conceptualize other religions that existed before they became formalized in the way that as they now exist. Um, so, well, I mean, you know, all over the world you have Celtic beliefs, Native American, although is that term America? Pretty sure that's European, right? So I don't know why it was called then. That betrays my own limitations of my own knowledge and how the way I can conceptualize other people's religion is in some sense dependent upon my own and filtered by my own experiences and the experiences of other people who speak the same language as me. And I think really language is the big kind of divider that leads to this kind of tribal tendencies that humans have, and which have seemed to have been kind of cemented into institutional religions such as Catholicism in quite a worrying way, and counterproductive way as well, as people focus on things that divide us rather than things that unite us. And of course, that's a lot easier to do when you speak the same language as someone and you can communicate effectively and actually kind of regard each other as equals in that way, rather than the kind of other, and that all too easily can lead to such unspeakable tragedies and evil. We'll get on to the problem of evil another time, I think, because if I try and discuss it now, my kind of perspective on that probably just go on forever. But to just kind of skim over it, I personally would say that in terms of, I'm talking about God straight away. So the most common, in my experience at least, kind of reason that people might offer for why they don't believe in God would be the problem of evil. This kind of idea of the inconsistent triad. God, if God can do everything, is everywhere, sees everything, why doesn't he make everything all cool all the time, no pain, no suffering? Personally, I just think that the answer to that just lies in the way, in the kind of Taoistic concept that is and isn't create each other, and so good creates evil, and without evil, or what we conceptualize as evil, you can have what we conceptualize as good. And in that way, things wouldn't actually really have meaning unless suffering exists, at least for a time. It doesn't have to necessarily always exist. And I mean, personally, I would describe myself as a Christian still, because I do believe that there is going to be another life, an afterlife, and that there will be a new creation. In fact, as books like Revelation point to, with effectively the the image that is used is of heaven and earth being kind of united and married together in a way in which currently they're kind of divided, and there's this tension between the two. Um, I mean, personally, from a scientific point of view, I would say that that literally is about the unity of matter and antimatter, then those being the two kind of fundamental types of um, thing which exist in the universe, other than, of course, the fields such as electromagnetism, gravity, and the strong, strong force, which got you know makes gluons be confined into actually form particles themselves before then gravity acts upon them. The thing which kind of keeps the atom together. So those kind of three forces, personally, I would characterize as God, and in that way, I do still very much like this kind of concept of the Trinity, which, interestingly, of course, is not just a Christian concept. It's uh, a symbol, a motif, which is found in many other religions that predate Christianity. Even the symbol which is used, most commonly to depict the Trinity. It's found in Celtic Britain before Christianity got there. It denoted concepts like the three spinners, I believe, in more kind of Germanic Norse mythology, and you have kind of triple deities as well in Hinduism, like Brahman, Shiva, and no, yeah, Shiva and Vishnu, I believe, maybe. I'm not sure. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sorry. Um, yeah, but if I recall, that's probably the best examples to most common examples that I can give. But there are many others, and yeah, I mean, if you investigate any Greek mythology or ancient Egyptian too, you can find similar kind of concepts. At different time, you have like Osiris, Isis, and Horus as well as another triple deity, which kind of features in a very popular story in ancient Egyptian mythology, which is all about kind of redemption, has the same kind of symbolic meaning as a lot of other stories in other cultures, including Christianity and including our own. Well, I say our own, I mean my own. Speaking, looking into the camera. Um, yeah. So yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think where to go next. So in terms of the problem of evil, for me, that's kind of what the way in which I find that I can resolve that is in a more practical way. It would be the idea that there's some kind of purpose in whatever I'm experiencing. So, I don't know, it could be anything. I could give any number of examples of times when something has gone badly at the time, and then in the future it's actually turned out to be a good thing because you learn something changes that wouldn't otherwise. One door closes, another one opens, kind of thing, and that, of course, pain in itself is perhaps something which you might say to me, well, Josh, well, what about that in itself, the sensation of it? But I really have been learning recently, personally, that pain can and is really a friend in some way, in as much as that it is telling you that something is wrong. It's telling you that you are not spending enough energy effectively on resolving some aspect of yourself. And I mean, that doesn't. Sometimes there's things like terminal illnesses. That's something else entirely. I'm talking about more in terms of my own life. I've got a a disability, which basically affects my um, connective tissue, so I quite easily sprain things, and I've just had quite a few kind of accidents in my life, which have injuries take longer to heal, and just uh, the response to them can often of your body kind of overcompensating can be counterproductive. But for me, I've been trying to kind of think about it recently in a way which is something like what it's telling me when I'm in pain, I have, so I most often have back pain from an injury when I was a child, and also a couple years ago again. But whenever I get pain, it just makes me think like, you're not, you haven't spent enough time working out, or you haven't spent enough time walking around, or exercising that the muscle, which prevents the pain in the first place. So pain really is just your body kind of saying, "There's a problem. There's a problem. There's a problem. You should be doing this, or you shouldn't be doing this." And we don't always know the answer, and it's not that simple. And sometimes the suffering can seem never ending, and sometimes it can even be terminal. But I think even within that, I think that all you can try to do really is look for the silver lining, and every cloud will have one. And I mean, for me, the afterlife does, is this kind of thing which, for me, this life will really seem like a dream in comparison to, the next life. It will almost be like, it's a nightmare if you have if you die in a horrific way. I mean, I think that will really kind of be like a nightmare, and on the other side, it will be like, you're a kid, and you've just woken up from a nightmare, and your mum will be there, or your dad, and just be like, "Oh, it's okay, it was just a dream," and yeah, I mean, I really do, and that's what I hold on to, and I think. I think it's what a lot of us do hold on to, and even if we don't say we believe in it, I think a lot of us hope for that in our hearts, uh, and just the sensation of going to sleep every day, and the way in which it's so fundamental, and really we do kind of like die and arise each day, and just purely in terms of our physiology, we are in some sense reborn. I do think that pattern is one which is not just in the physical world, but also in the metaphysical. And I think that again, spirit kind of as antimatter can kind of unlock that conceptually. For me, at least, it did. By thinking about antimatter, which is this crazy thing which is all around us all the time, and like dark matter as well, which I think they're the same thing basically, with negative mass. I'll discuss that. I mean, I have discussed that in my previous video. I'm sure I will at some point in the future, hopefully. But yeah, I mean, conceptualizing in that way has really helped me to kind of think about the way in which you know there's two sides to kind of every story. There's always different perspectives that you can take on anything that happens, uh, and yeah, if you look hard enough, I think you'll be able to find a silver lining in any cloud. Really, and I mean that's not for me saying that's something I can do all the time or whatever. It's no, I mean I need to tell myself this more than anyone really. I think, and so maybe that's all that this is. um, but yeah, I mean I don't know. I think it's it's just a constant constant struggle that we have with ourselves, a constant uh, thought process in the back of our head. As we all know, we're going to die. We all know that, there's this, the absurdity of existence is just this kind of hanging question. What am I doing? Why am I doing it? What's the purpose of it all? Where does it end up? All these kind of questions. I think even if we don't focus on them and people might not want to talk about them or whatever, I think that you know somewhere uh, it's in all of our psyches, and as we lay there dying, get a concoction of chemicals produced by our brain, probably including dimethyltryptamine, DMT, which is produced in our lungs, by the way. One of the most powerful, kind of psychoactive substances that's ever been discovered. Doing a lot of interesting research on it at Imperial, I believe, at the moment in London. On It's actually, well, I won't go into that now, but you should look it up. It's insane. Um, but as we're having that experience of death, I mean, so many people that have kind of died and had a near death experience as well have reported some kind of introspective, almost kind of like sci-fi, like I'm just thinking of 2001 Space Odyssey right now, and like the end scene. um, some kind of like apparition, some like scenes are presented to you, some kind of voice or light. You see, the basic kind of concept is just that your consciousness doesn't die with your body. And you're going back to that kind of panpsychist worldview that I hold, which is now different. It's different to the kind of Christianity that I was raised in. I do see consciousness as everywhere. I mean, in that sense, I see consciousness as the thing which creates matter rather than matter creating consciousness. And so, in that way, I mean, that's just the idealist kind of perspective. Um, but rather that, and in that way, it's kind of pantheistic. It's kind of it's not atheistic in that sense. It's very much yeah, it's theistic in the sense that if you can perceive God as consciousness, God as like mind, God as like the creator, like the ultimate kind of source of power and everything. And in that way, I mean, for me personally, that's really where the image of the mother really does kind of tie in a way which never really clicked for me in a way in the Christianity I was raised in the way in which you know in the way, if you just describe God in masculine terms as father, well, ultimately for every human being, the first thing that we know is the mother. The first thing that we know, the first thing, we we don't exist until as in your genome, as in you, as in anyone, as in individual unique being does not exist until the sperm and the egg unite, and then you've got enough genes, enough chromosomes to create a new being, and these two things fuse in this crazy cosmic dance, and you're created, and but the first thing that you're inside the womb, inside our mothers, and it's her heart, in fact, which beats for ours before our heart has developed. It's her heart which sustains us, and actually creates the space for us to grow. Uh, she is the first thing that we ever know. And so in that way, I mean, it really has clicked with me on a very deep emotional level, very childlike kind of in the womb, kind of trying to recollect that kind of sensation. This idea of God as mother, as God as source, God as consciousness, God as like the first thing, the first thing we ever know is the mother. And of course, the father is also there, needed before that the mother knows the father, kind of thing. for us to be born. But for me, that's such a big part of God that's missing, and it's found in a lot of course, more. I'd say generally more kind of rural folk kind of traditions. Mother Earth basically is just the kind of concept, and she has there's many forms that Mother Earth takes. Uh, that the mother takes, Sophia perhaps here being one of them, which of course got the snake around the pole, which in terms of symbology, I think it's really there if you trace through the Bible. So now, in terms of the Bible specifically for me, I think that is where the problems lie. Basically, I talked a bit about language before, and I mean, for me personally, I think that that's kind of the way in which, as language has developed in different contexts, as society has industrialized more, and languages such as Greek and Latin came to prominence, I think that there's been a lot of, well, as well with just the way in which standardization actually happens, and the way in which anyone who's making copies of things or writing things, any scribe, ultimately has to be paid and fed by someone in some way. And normally that's someone with money, normally that's someone in a position of power, which throughout a lot of history has tended to be a very small amount of men at the very top of society. So, uh, of course, with Latin, it's the Roman Empire, and then once it kind of transitioned to being Christian, no, no offense meant to anyone, but just in the sense that Christian, uh, the word Christian, didn't even exist until around that kind of time of the Catholic Church. They were the ones who kind of introduced it. So that's why I'm kind of doing like quotation marks. It's like they kind of invented that concept, and the confines and linguistic and conceptual terms that we have around that in a way which detaches us, in my belief, from the kind of original Jewish context of Jesus, Yeshua. I'm probably butchering his name in actual Hebrew, but it's and actually it probably would have been Aramaic that Jesus spoke in, and I mean that's the most glaring thing for me, is that we don't actually have the copies of the Bible in its original, in the language that Jesus would have originally spoken in Aramaic, for the New Testament at least. I'm talking, of course, for the New Testament, it's a different story. For the Old Testament, we used to only have the Greek copies BC. It used to be that we only had Hebrew from the 9th century. Um, but there was the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, which are fascinating in and of themselves and provide a lot of insight into a kind of parallel canon, which exists, and I mean, for me, really unlocked a way of seeing the Bible in a different way, and thinking about actually was there a lot more that used to be in the Bible that now isn't, and that got left out by these various councils. So as well as the Roman Catholic kind of councils, which would just be men from all around the empire chosen by the emperor to come commune and decide on a set of statements that form the basis of their institution. It's such a masculine in terms of like hyper ordered, like controlling kind of manner. I mean, in Taoism, that's kind of the way in which the yin yang characterized, is like masculine and feminine, force, like order and chaos. Chaos not necessarily being a bad thing, because of course it just means potential. Like order being like actuality, and like chaos being potentiality. So it's just like this again interplay between these two kind of dynamic forces, the masculine and feminine, the matter and antimatter, perhaps, this kind of just dualistic nature of reality, which for me personally goes all the way down at every level in this kind of fractaling pattern of all the different possible versions of you which exist within your own head and outside in the universe. I mean, for me personally, I do ascribe, I mean, I'm really giving you a lot of information now, but I do ascribe to the kind of seven Hermetic principles. I mean, Hermeticism. So Hermes is the staff. This is Hermes staff, which is the symbol of medicine um, in the well, all over the world. The snake around the pole, not necessarily with two snakes, but yeah, with two snakes. I believe it's Hermes staff. And he's a figure in ancient Egyptian and ancient Greek mythology. Um, it's like the one of the messengers of the gods. But the reason why I got onto that before I lose my train of thought is so the Hermetic principles. Basically, one of them is this kind of concept of you know everything that is happening in the world has this kind of mirror of the inner world. That's one of them. So it's like as above, so below is the kind of shortened kind of phrase of that. This kind of idea of basically just astrology, effectively. Similar kind of principle. Uh, yeah, and well, there's many others. I mean, you can look them up for yourself, please. I don't need to list them all, I'm sure. But another one would be that all is mental, which is another, just way of saying that kind of statement of God as consciousness everywhere, as me, as you, as your dog, as your cat, as the leaves, the spores in the air, the bacteria, the just everything, like you know, um, and even individual pieces of matter themselves. It's all just energy. It's all just energy. So that would just be another way of saying it. It's just like God is energy, and energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be transformed into different forms, and that's just the way and many others, an increasing number, I believe, would see the world and see it as just God playing different roles, different forms, this kind of cosmic stage, it's divine play. Um, I mean, as for what the plot is, I mean, I do think that there is some kind of truth, that threads through the Bible, but personally, I do think it has been concealed a lot of the kind of fullness of the story, which I think that basically conceiving of the Holy Spirit, the third person of the Trinity, as being the Holy Mother, Mother Earth, however you want to describe her, and with that kind of reading that into the text, I think it then unlocks, and a lot of people might say, well, that's me just bringing my thing and trying to read what I want into the Bible. But you've got to remember that that's an uncommon belief to have these days. Generally, most people either don't believe in God, or they believe in God in this kind of well, in the West at least, let's say, they believe in this more kind of monotheistic my God, rather than this kind of more just hippie kind of way of looking at things. But most other people in the ancient world were like that. And if you actually read a lot of the Old Testament, there's a lot of times when the Jews, Israel, would practice things which the Bible then kind of denounced as idolatry. They worship other gods. They'd make cakes, for example, in Jeremiah, to the Queen of Heaven. And interestingly, in that story, the reason that is given is they say um, that when they stopped doing that, that's when they got invaded by Babylon. But Jeremiah says to them, no, 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 it was because you were doing that that it happened. So even within the Bible in its current form, you have this kind of acknowledgement that polytheism and worshipping God in other ways other than what the people in the temple in Jerusalem said they could, and the king said they could, that that happened at various points. I mean, even Solomon himself was towards the end of his life, after all his meetings with various women, seemed to practice this kind of polytheism, um, and you can really go down the rabbit hole in this one, and but I do think that generally literary criticism and this kind of way in which the Bible's kind of being unpicked, in the way that like you can kind of ascribe different parts to different times based on when an edit would have had to occur, and the words that are used, the place names that are described as well, because a lot of the places that are listed in Genesis, Exodus, the first five books, for example, uh, the places wouldn't actually have been called that until much later during the time of the second temple after the return from Babylon. I mean, for me personally, that's when I think that the Bible in its current form dates from. It dates from the second temple. We don't have publicly any documents from the first temple period or before that. We do have a lot of archaeological evidence, and a lot of that points to this more polytheistic viewpoint where you have, for example, temples outside of Jerusalem, which was during the first temple period mostly, I believe. And in fact, uh, well, funnily enough, uh, they in that temple they discovered in the incense that was used there was cannabis, I believe, as well, as one of the ingredients used. So that's again another thing which would be potentially mistranslated in the Greek version that we currently have, because the word in the incense ingredient list is different to cannabis slightly. It's similar etymologically, but uh, we now have more kind of direct archaeological evidence, by doing some kind of crazy chemical analysis. They can do insane things these days, to check what kind of its mass is atomically or something. Excuse me. But yeah, so I mean, within that as well, you could say that they're within this kind of monotheistic push. There's also this kind of prohibitionist effort as well, potentially with this as well, because you've got to also appreciate, I think, that as I probably mentioned in my talk with the Psychedelic Research Society, that psychedelics, especially, and various other substances, have been used ritualistically in other religions for thousands of years. I mean, Christianity has just alcohol, really, with the wine, potentially some incense if it's more generally more Eastern churches. Um, but yeah, I mean that's fascinating in itself. I think, in the way in which kind of that kind of control that enables, especially because there's been all kinds of studies recently on the way in which psychedelics can affect your beliefs, and how they tend to make people more kind of fatalistic, more kind of open to panpsychist kind of views of God in the way that I've been discussing. And yeah, I mean, just this kind of skepticism, I think, of the way in which we've kind of always thought, because that's kind of what these things do. I mean, it's not just like you just have to achieve a psychedelic experience. You don't just have to take a substance. I mean, in fact, really, I think that the psychological component or the physiological component can achieve it by itself, and is the main kind of a part of it, in the sense that just meditating, I think personally, achieves the same thing because you've got to remember that your body can produce a whole host of chemicals by itself. You don't need to ingest something from externally. I mean, something external only works because your body has the receptors needed to interact with these molecules. So, uh, yeah, I mean, I think dreams as well is another one probably where something like DMT could well be, it's been speculated, could be involved in, as well as melatonin, which both are produced by the pineal gland, often called the third eye, of course, and which potentially ancient people seem to have more of an awareness of, and it seems that this has kind of been lost as industrialization has occurred and as language has developed in a way that has become very standardized. And I mean, English is probably the ultimate kind of, I don't know, maybe not English, but maybe I don't know. The only other thing I'm thinking of is Mandarin, in terms of like how far it's been spread, and in terms of with empire, maybe Spanish as well, I guess. But all these, they're all kind of, or I guess, no, maybe they're not all Latin languages. And this is when I need to be talking to someone that does linguistics or knows what they're talking about. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe I should cut that. I'm not sure. Maybe. Should we see how we're doing on the? I think we're still going. Still going on that thing. Maybe we should we can keep going. I don't know what else to say. I mean, yeah. So in terms of the mother, I think that's really what I want to kind of share the most. I mean, I don't know how to kind of express that really, because it's such a truly personal thing, and in many ways indescribable, um, ineffable. And I think that that's something again which is almost the essence of femininity, in that there's this kind of concealment around it. There's this kind of darkness. I mean, the image of the veil, which is in the Bible, it's what splits when Jesus dies. The image being that kind of we can have access to God now, to the presence of God. Now that Jesus died, then the Holy Spirit can, we can receive the Holy Spirit ourselves through seeking it, uh, and essentially doing as Jesus did. And he got baptized. I mean, that's a symbol of rebirth, which to me makes so much more sense. Uh, Trying to understand my my own beliefs and how they change now, and in terms of it's a rebirth. That's what it symbolizes with the waters, and it's it's women that give birth. So that's just biology. That's just the order of it. And I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me to have the entity watching over that. The Holy Spirit is a man, when we already have the Father and the Son. So what about the mother? It's yeah. I mean, I think for me, these archetypes is effectively what there are, which is concept, kind of Jungian, Carl Jung concept, or term. But I think that's the very core of the human psyche, and just in the sense that we, as a species, there is this kind of binary. Of course, there's also intersex people, which have more than two chromosomes, I believe, generally is how it occurs. Um, so, there's, of course, also there are non-binary people in just biologically, in terms of people that fall outside the binary of X, 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 Y. Um, but again, then you have this. I mean, for me, you have this binary again between binary and non-binary. It's like you step back again into another dimension, and there's binary again. kind of thing. And so in that way, I do think that while you know binary is in everything in some way with this kind of yin yang concept, that it really is like just an infinitely complex fractal mix in terms of any actual complex being, such as a person, because people have masculine and feminine energies and beings, and I don't know how else to describe it, but just not just in terms of physically, but also in terms of the mind, the spirit, even. And I think that it's for me personally. I think getting this kind of concept of like getting in touch with your feminine side, it's also kind of coincided with just like kind of reconnecting with my inner child, that kind of concept, like just like the part of yourself which is like the unconscious, right? Just like the other half, like the like the dialogue, because I think that ultimately everything is in dialogue, really, and that's what it this kind of duality means. It's just this kind of like togetherness, like this community that goes down to like every level. Like it's like you know uh yeah, the self and the other, the known, the unknown, like this constant dance. um it's what we're trapped in. But you know who am I to be saying this? I mean, I'd be curious for your thoughts, but I mean, just from my own experiences and the way I've been kind of thinking about this and trying to come to terms with what's happening in the world, and uh, what's happened in my own life, I do find that like thinking about you know just this thinking in this kind of way, and thinking about like God as this kind of like consciousness, like kind of that takes different forms, and yeah, I don't know. I've just found it quite profound, really, and I don't know how to describe it. It's what can I say? I'm speechless. But yeah, I think that in general, I think that I'm but one small part, connected to it all. So you know, it's no one's insignificant. But I think that we're in a time generally of just rising awareness of the mother. I think that there has been this imbalance between men and women, between masculine and feminine. I mean, in Genesis, it's kind of part of the woman's curse. The man's curse is to work the field, I believe, in Genesis, and women's is pain and childbirth, and that the man will kind of rule over and like dominate them, which has for a lot of history been the case, sadly. But I say sadly, I think that it's just half the story, and that there's that's not the end of the story. And I think that it's again, it's like suffering. It's like suffering. It's necessary for the redemption. There has to be the fall for the redemption. And it's like for me, if you really think about the Genesis story, taking it literally, to me, I think doesn't do it justice, because the real depth and truth that is in it is found if you do analyze it in this more kind of Jungian way, and you think just kind of conceptually about the message that it's trying to say, and the way in which it says that they have to have the knowledge of for the knowledge of good and evil, that brings suffering, because those two things go hand in hand. But without the knowledge of good and evil, then there's no real freedom. That's what's necessary for this kind of like perception that we have for this existence, for this way of being, for kind of consciousness to generate, and for like a species to develop. That well, just conceptually it seems, or physically, there needed to be this. I think really it just goes down to the matter antimatter asymmetry. So in order to create an asymmetry, you need this kind of duality rather than just having this kind of like oneness of consciousness. And so in that way, that's what kind of generates our perception of linear time. I mean, I go into this again more in the previous detail, but I think that yeah, this duality, I think, it's in time itself really. And I think personally, I think the last 2,000 years have probably been the worst in terms of patriarchy, in terms of, I think that in a lot more ancient cultures that we don't have a lot of the writings of, we they would have been much more of a role that women played, which were much more prominent and respected in society, as healers, especially, I think, um, and which again goes to the symbol of the staff, um, but many other things. Also, like priestesses, rather than the priests all being men as they are in the Abrahamic religions, although of course not all churches, but just kind of generally in the mainline traditions. But yeah, I mean, I think that of course, we're in a time of change, and women are being paid more for their labor. They're being recognized more for their qualities, and yeah, I think we're living in a time. I mean, they say the future is female. I mean, I think there is something to that. I think that it's just part of it. I think it's just part of the revelation. It's part of the reveal. It's part of the kind of pull back, and that revelation can only be of that which is concealed, and that which is concealed is the feminine. So it's you know, and yeah, I think that's what we're living through, and even the fact that I can speak to you in this format and I kind of reach through to you through the web, I think that that's part of it. That's it's a way in which the it's the web is it's like with the spider, the symbology around it, and the way in which it connects us, and it's like that community, that kind of sociality. I think that that's also a very kind of feminine thing, because I mean uh, in Jung's kind of conceptual universe, the unconscious, rather than like the Freudian model, you have the ego, the superego, the id. Jung just divides the mind into two: the conscious and the unconscious. And then, but with the unconscious, he thinks that the unconscious is kind of connected to everyone else's unconscious. So that's how, like, we all have collective archetypes, who are these kind of motifs which appear in stories again and again and again, um, and potentially even ways in which we can kind of people can hallucinate or see something in the future, or even deja vu at any moment of kind of serendipity. I think those moments can also involve potentially this kind of telepathic connection that we all potentially have access to through these kind of other dimensions that science is only now just kind of beginning to kind of verify with big machines at CERN, which exists. So yeah, I think that as scientific knowledge is increasing, as a lot more ancient documents are being discovered, as well as Dead Sea Scrolls, we also now have things like the Nag Hammadi Codex, which is written in Coptic, which is ancient Egyptian language from around the, well, not ancient Egyptian, but Egyptian language from around the time of Christ. So there's even more context that we're now getting to different religions as people are connecting, and people that wouldn't previously have been able to share their stories with the world now are able to upload it and immortalize it in film forever. Um, and as we just consume so much more content, and the way in which that happens is just so much gets faster and faster, and technology will just get so insane until probably it'll just be streamed straight into your eyes or your brain, or who knows where it will go with all the Neuralink technology. But I think, well, the end. But I think, uh, and I wouldn't get one if I was you, but that's by the by. Well, maybe it depends what model, perhaps. But yeah, I mean, I think we're living in a time when the awareness of the mother is increasing. I think that there's really a crying out for it, because people have been so deprived of her and her healing presence for so long. And it, for me personally, just the I've been just so blessed with the women in my life. I know, and I think that it's an archetype which everyone can relate to in some way, in a positive way, just in the way that everyone, in our most innermost being, it's the force which we first felt sustaining our life. Um, I think that we can really, it's something we really need to draw strength on in these times, as the world just keeps on getting crazier and crazier, as the 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 whoever you want to call them, but quite often men, the whoever you want to call them, the people in charge of this world. I think I think they're not going to go down without trying everything they can, but yeah, I think the secret's got to get out sooner or later, kind of thing, and I don't think they can hold back the wave of information that's coming, and I mean, personally, what I believe will be like the third kind of big cataclysm in Earth's history. Completely could be wrong about that, but that's just after an interesting book I read recently by this guy called Chan Thomas. But who knows? It could be nuts. But I do think that there's probably some kind of cyclical element to just the way that reality works, and that makes sense in this kind of hermetic and astrological way of thinking. And even within the Bible itself, it says this. Most religions have the concept of. It doesn't say. Sorry, the Bible. It says there's two in its current form. It doesn't describe the other third would potentially be during the fall, just kind of like that whole kind of basically it would just be saying that like the events that are described in the Garden of Eden to the fall, like that's all like that's also just like a cataclysm, and that in its original form that story would have been much like simpler, because of course language would have been much simpler back during the time when it's describing. So like yeah, I mean obviously the Bible claims that like Moses was just told by God, exactly what to write, and that was the history kind of thing, rather than so in that way, in its current form, Christianity does just seem a bit like jarring or like odd to me in the way in which it's like just like, and it's not just Christianity, it's just any religion that's like, yeah, God like just spoke to like this one guy and he's got everything right, but like and that's it. Like no one else can be inspired by God. No, God isn't in anything else. Like God's just here, and this just kind of exclusivity in this way in which it's like who's in and who's out kind of way, and how it's got so twisted up with like identity as a nation. And I mean, personally, I think that's got a lot to do with just the history of Israel and how they, it says in the Bible they got a king, and then that led to all kinds of trouble because then when you get a king, then it becomes more you become more of a target for other kings in the area who want to kind of conquer you. It just it's the way it goes. It just kind of perpetuates itself wherever you put your energy. If you centralize in power, it just kind of spirals. There's so many political ideologies I found out, sadly. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, and then of course they were exiled for a long time, and yeah, I think when they came back, and during we have this kind of very kind of glorified. Um, I mean, it seems it probably is a touch ironic to people that the Jewish in its current form, like the Bible, the canon is like they have like Maccabees and stuff in it as well because that's like what Hanukkah's about, which was just recently. Um, Although obviously the menorah predates these events. It was just like during the time when the Second Temple was like after in some ways it well it was I think it was during the yes it was before the Roman Empire. I mean, so it was basically just the Jews like uh, some of them fought in a like guerrilla war against the Romans. No, sorry, the Greeks. After after Alexander died, someone tried to invade like one of the successor empires. Actually, I think they probably weren't Greek, but yeah, it was like similar kind of ideas and time, and they kind of yeah, I mean, they kind of threw out these kind of this imperial kind of power which existed, uh, and I mean, obviously, of course, they frame it the way the story's framed is just in terms of like we have our one god and they wanted us to serve other gods, but ultimately they just end up being ruled by the Romans, and I mean, somehow I just think that yeah, I think that it's quite a kind of. I just think that ultimately patriarchy and kind of centralization, because in that sense, I mean, there's ways in which people can also interpret Genesis to be kind of this. And in all of this that I'm saying, by the way, I'm not saying that what I'm saying is like that's it or it's correct. It's just an idea which I think is kind of part of the truth. It doesn't mean that there's some things which do exclude each other and be contradictory, but there's also a lot which isn't contradictory. So multiple interpretations for me, like multiple different things people taking from any story. I think that just means it's an even better story kind of thing. Like, but yeah, I mean, and people describe it as like an individuation thing as well, especially in the more ancient kind of stories of uh, Genesis as well, like the myths as well, involving Lilith, for example. So I think that thinking about like because in that way I think men in some ways effectively what I'm saying is that men have more of kind of like a issue with ego sometimes in a way which is like it's too big kind of thing, uh, or just like you're just too focused on yourself as an individual, something like that. And the majority of psychopaths, I believe, statistics would say are men, uh, because it does seem that there is that is effectively what the difference is between men and women in some ways, like women's part of women's curse in Genesis is childbirth. But you've got to remember that the curse actually is what gives things meaning, because it's like that struggle. That's what gives you meaning. It's the struggle against your curse, kind of thing. Like to get the curse lifted. It's like a story. You've got to remember that there's an end to it, and like you are the end. That's kind of the point. You don't just like, it's not like the story is just the story, and you're like, I love the story, and yeah, this is what happens in the story. This is what happens. No, it's like you're living your own story. Like everything's a story. You just got to keep it going, kind of thing. Like it's you don't just get too fixated on like the details of what you've been told. It's like, what's the meaning? What can I take from it? And you know, how does this apply to my life? And just listening to what's happening around you. And yeah, I think people are becoming more aware of this. I think there's just generally an awakening of kind of consciousness, and I think there's great many factors in this. But it's an exciting time to be alive, and I feel very grateful and blessed to be sharing this with you, if it ever makes it to you. Um, but yeah, I mean, I could probably go on for a very long time. To be fair, I mean, I don't know. Who knows? I probably just get stuck again, like I do occasionally, and try and fill it like I am now. Um, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what else to say. I'm gonna probably title this, yeah, something like, yeah, reconnecting with mother. I don't know. Yeah, I think I've kind of fulfilled the title topic. So I might just call it a day now. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, any interactions would be much appreciated. I don't know when I'll do anything more on this. I'd love to discuss more about the history, more about the philosophy, more about what it means, and more about kind of this idea as well of like female and creation as well, and like thinking about the fact that it was the Holy Spirit that gave birth, created, conceived of, however you want to, what word you want to use, of Christ in Mary's womb. It's in the story. It's like, you know, for me, it's more like feminine is the creation, and then father is the destruction kind of vibes. But of course, it goes both ways. Also, there's the feminine destructive as well. I mean, that's illustrated here on this lovely uh, image of Sophia with this kind of Kali-like figure here, and this kind of nursing mother figure here. So I think within both genders, energies, positive, negative kind of thing, 1-0, this kind of binary. I think that it's that there is a binary within the binary, just like I said about there are non-binary people and things, concepts, for example. So but even within that, then there is a binary between non-binary and binary. So it's just, you've just got to think about a fractal. And a fractal, I mean, if you don't know what a fractal is, talk about it again in my talk. It's just basically about imaginary numbers, because there are multiple types of numbers. Basically, imaginary numbers just correspond to negative numbers, because you have like 0, of course, yeah, number line, basic. I'm sure people will know, but imaginary numbers basically just the square root of the negative numbers. What's root of -1? It's I. Spoiler. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of how I like to think about it. And with that imaginary numbers, what it basically allows you to do is create these kind of fractal patterns, which, I mean, I don't really have any examples here, but you can kind of go on forever. There's loads of videos you can find. Just Mandelbrot set. It just goes on forever. It's just these weird ratios in maths, these transcendental numbers, and all that fun stuff, which I managed to write in my dissertation. So if you're interested in that, feel free to check it out and all the video. I'm curious for anyone's thoughts on how this was, what you thought, and anything you'd like to talk about. And thank you so much for watching if you made it to now. Um, and yeah, well, God bless, and I hope to talk to some of you soon. And yeah, uh, I'm excited to see where this will go, and hopefully, I mean, if this is just nonsense, then it'll probably go nowhere. So we'll see, I guess. Yeah, cool. Peace. Thank you.